Good morning. I'm Samuel Goldman. I teach political science here at the George Washington University, and it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to this third conference on foreign policy sponsored by the American Conservative. When we met for the first time in this room 3 years ago, I was not altogether certain that there would be a sequel. But I'm delighted that these conferences have become a trilogy, and I hope that they will continue to become a series, because the American Conservative and the distinguished participants in today's discussion bring a much needed and sadly unpopular perspective to debates about our foreign policy. Now, I know that you are not here this morning to hear from me, so I will keep my welcoming remarks very brief. First, I would like to thank the Charles Koch Institute for its support of this conference, and I would also like to thank the members of the host committee, whose names are printed in your program. That's about it. I'm pleased to say, discharged my duties for the day, which gives me the opportunity to join you in the audience and to hear from today's speakers. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming the editor of the American Conservative, Bob Merry, who will introduce the program.
Thank you very much, and thank you, all of you, for coming. This is a tremendous crowd. We've been building our crowd every year since we began 3 years ago, and so it's just a pleasure to see all of you here. I want to just sort of reiterate also thanking the Charles Koch Institute and also our other sponsors. The American Conservative was born in 2002 in the run-up to the Iraq War, which we opposed. We opposed that folly, and we opposed all the folly that has emanated from it. We've opposed all of the faulty thinking that propelled it. And throughout our existence, we have been promoters of restraint, realism, and restraint. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Our program, as you can see, is star-studded. It's designed for serious discourse, and I hope you find it enjoyable, and I hope you find it even more significantly enlightening. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Congressman Walter B. Jones, Jr., some identifying characteristics of the congressman. He's from North Carolina, as you know. He's the son of longtime Democratic congressman from North Carolina, Walter Jones Sr. Walter Jones Jr. was first elected in 1994. I find this interesting. He was, in a poll of congressional staffers, he was named the kindest member of Congress. That's a great recommendation. He's a maverick at times. He doesn't always hew to the party line, and that has gotten him into some hot water with some of his colleagues from time to time, but he doesn't seem to mind that. His most significant distinction from our perspective is that he converted, essentially, to realism and restraint after strongly supporting George W. Bush's Iraq invasion. He later fully acknowledged the error of his earlier sentiments and told Finley Lewis, who wrote a piece in our current magazine on the realists in Congress, that the turning point came when he attended the funeral of a Marine who had been killed in action, sitting next to or nearby the Marine's widow, who was crying, of course. He told Finley, "I cried with the wife, and it awakened me to what I had done." Those are rare words. I've been in this town for almost 45 years and covered Congress and politics for much of that, and those are rare words for people in politics to acknowledge the error of their ways. Since then, he's been at the vanguard of the effort to rein in presidential war initiatives, especially those taken without congressional approval, which is increasingly a major, major constitutional problem in our view. In March of 2007, he was one of only 2 Republicans who voted for a bill requiring an end date for the Iraq occupation. He angered his colleagues, as I noted, affected his committee assignments. He angered many of his constituents as well. But he remained and still remains steadfast in his support of realism and restraint. And so now it's my pleasure to give you Walter B. Jones, Jr. of North Carolina.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Robert, thank you very much for the introduction. I am pleased and honored to have a few minutes of your day and to share my thoughts and concerns as well about the fact that too many times Congress does not meet its constitutional responsibility, which in my opinion the most important responsibility any member has is to send a young man or woman to die for this country. I want to speak in my time on Afghanistan. We have been there 16 years. We have spent well over $1 trillion. We have had over 2,300 Americans killed and over 20,000 wounded. I have Camp Lejeune Marine Base in my district. I have Cherry Point Marine Air Station. I have well over 80,000 retired military in the 3rd District of North Carolina. I have these posters with the one today is the what I carry on the floor of the House when we debate. Sometimes I just, like other members of Congress, I do a 5-minute speech, or sometimes it is a debate. And to me, the poster to my right is more important to C-SPAN and those watching C-SPAN than the words I might use to share my disappointment. So it's always, war is, many of you in this audience today, you've been to war. I've never been to war. But I can say this, that the pain of war is something that I will never know. But the pain of war for those who did return and the families whose sons and daughters did not return is something that none of us, unless we've been there, can appreciate. I wrote to President Trump in July of this year. I am very frustrated that Paul Ryan, as well as John Boehner, have not allowed and would not, in the past tense with Boehner, allow Congress to have a debate on a new AUMF. In 2001, while in Congress, President Bush asked for an AUMF on Afghanistan after 9/11, and I did support that. In 2002, when he asked for an AUMF on Iraq, I made my mistake and voted for it. Yet, in 16 years and all the pain and cost of war, we don't even debate it anymore. So when I saw that President Trump was working with General Mattis with the idea that they were going to send a few more troops to Afghanistan, I was very disappointed because Mr. Trump campaigned and made 30 comments, and I'm sure many of the comments were tweets, but 30 comments about how ridiculous and wasteful it was to be in Afghanistan. So I wrote him on the 16th and asked him, if you will, ask the Congress to debate whether we should or should not send 4,000 or 5,000 more troops to Afghanistan, and whether we should continue the waste, fraud, and abuse in Afghanistan. I wrote him this letter on July the 18th. I'm not going to read the whole letter to you, just a couple of points. I listed 4 tweets of the 30 that he had used while a citizen and then as a candidate and then as President of the United States. The last one is this. You also tweeted in the year 2014, let's get out of Afghanistan. Our troops are being killed by the Afghanis we train, and we waste billions there. Nonsense, rebuilding the United States of America. Mr. President, I agree with those remarks, and so does the 31st Commandant of the Marine Corps, my friend and unofficial advisor, General Chuck Krulak. As he said in a recent email to me, no one has ever conquered Afghanistan, and many have tried. We will join the list of nations that have tried and failed. I did not get a response back, but I did send it. General Krulak has been a friend of mine ever since he was a Commandant of the Marine Corps. I value his friendship and I trust his judgment on war because he is a Vietnam Marine himself who fought for this country. Again, he's been a very special friend. The frustration of Congress is this. When Boehner was in office as Speaker, and now Paul Ryan, we have sent as many as 13 letters, some myself, 3 or 4, the others with other members of Congress from both parties. Let us meet our constitutional responsibility. Give us the right to debate. That is a constitutional responsibility and requirement. And there's nothing more important for a member of Congress to debate sending a young man or woman to die. And yet we don't do it anymore. It's like it doesn't matter. I don't understand that at all. I really do not. But we're going to continue to push. But we need you, the conservatives here today, and the American people, and the liberals, to demand that the leadership of the House permit the Congress to debate war. Because if we don't, it's going to be perpetual from now on. And I'll use again Afghanistan because that is 16 years. There's a justification to have a strong military. I am for a justification of a strong military. But when I see the foreign policies of the previous administration and now the foreign policy developing of this administration, I am very concerned about the lack of our constitutional duty to debate. A couple other points very quickly. I think that too often the American people have too much on their plate. And if they don't have a young man or woman in uniform, they're not really going to think about it. I've signed well over 11,000 letters to families who've lost loved ones in Afghanistan and Iraq because I made a terrible mistake. Robert talked about it in the introduction of going into Iraq. It was a very unnecessary war. Again, it's my problem. I don't blame anybody for what I did. I did it myself. I've asked God for forgiveness. In closing, I want to read one thing to you that touched my heart. In 2010, I happened to be watching Face the Nation with Bob Schieffer. And that morning, I just happened to see this, his editorial. And he said, I was in an airport lounge the other day when I saw a woman across the way. Why I kept staring, I don't know. Maybe it's just that she seemed so sad. And then I understood, and I looked away, hoping she had not seen me stare. Because in her lap was an American flag, neatly folded into a triangle and placed in a clear plastic case. A flag folded the way it always is when it's given to a soldier's family, as a soldier's coffin is lowered into the grave. I figured her to be a soldier's mother, and I couldn't help but wonder what memories that flag evoked as she held it there. Did it remind her of the first time she had seen her child in the delivery room? Or was it the memory of seeing him go off to school that first day? Or when he brought home the prize from the science fair, or maybe made the touchdown? Or gave her the first Valentine when he wrote out, "Mama, I love you"? I kept thinking about all the talk in Washington about the high cost of defense and how we are about to bankrupt the country. But as I watched that woman, budget seemed to be such a small part of all of it. No, the real cost of war is not what we pay in dollars and cents. The real cost is what we take from a mother who's left with just a memory and a neatly folded flag in a clear plastic case. That editorial by Bob Schieffer probably says what my heart feels. it is so sad to me to be a member of Congress and knowing that we have young men and women in Africa, 4 died a month ago, and then you have Senator McCain and Lindsey Graham, my friends, who said we didn't know we had troops there. It is time for the American people to take back their Constitution, because you can't trust Congress to follow the Constitution. And again, if there's anything more important than to send a young man or woman to die for this country, and like Afghanistan, we have no end to it. We don't know what the end's going to be. We have no benchmark. We just keep sending them over there. We keep sending money. The DOD spent $6 million to buy 9 goats. We keep sending more and more money that's wasted. Fraud and abuse abounds over there. John Sopko, Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction, testified 2 days ago. I was on the committee. He testified. It just goes on. And yet you, the American people, are paying for it. And if you have a son or daughter that's died for this country, there's no way you can figure out what the cost really is. That pain is too heavy. I will close this way. I have do this on the floor of the House. I'm going to do it here at this conference, and I really appreciate having a few minutes of your time. I ask God to please bless our men and women in uniform. I ask God to bless the families of our men and women in uniform. I ask God in His loving arms to hold the families who've given a child dying for freedom and the wars around the world. I ask God to bless the conservatives of America, that they will speak out in behalf of the Constitution and fight to protect the rights of the American people. And I ask God to please bless the House and Senate, that we will do what is right in the eyes of God for God's people today and God's people tomorrow. And I ask 3 times, as I have for every president since I've been in Congress, I ask God to please bless the President of the United States, that he would do what is right in the eyes of God for God's people today and God's people tomorrow. And I will close by asking 3 times, God, please, God, please, God, please continue to bless America. Thank you very much.